All right, so we're going to get started, and
Can y'all hear me?
just mute yourself when you're not talking. And Sherry, if you want to say something before we begin the slideshow. And this, I'm just showing Harvey's website right now, which has its own slideshow up there. But if you want to give a little introduction, Galen, if you want to say anything, and then I'll play the slideshow, and then we can talk photo by photo, whatever you want to talk about. Go ahead, Sherry.
All right. So I just want to welcome everybody to the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign's slideshow. We've been around for over 25 years. We have been fortunate. You're going to hear a lot of those little sounds in the background. I apologize for that. Those are people throughout the Philadelphia area and other parts of the country that are needing assistance. And so they're texting this phone. But initially, I'm Sherry Honkala, and I founded the organization, the Kensington Welfare Rights Union. And I located about 6 other mothers that were in the Kensington area, where I still live to this day. And we got together and we started an organization called the Kensington Welfare Rights Union. And then, several years later, we formed an organization called the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, because at that stage in history, it wasn't just about welfare recipients. We understood that the economy was very fluid, and so some days people could be on welfare, and then the next they could be homeless. So we formed together with poor and homeless people from across the entire country, and created in the basement of the Highlander Center, the national organization known as the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign. And now we have something that's called the Poor People's Army. So that's my short introduction. But now we're going to view the photographs, and then myself and my colleague, Galen Tyler, who has been around since the beginning as well, will help to talk about some of the photos. They're first going to go through really quickly, and then we're going to go through each one individually, and Galen and myself will talk a little bit about what you see in those photographs. All right, I hope you enjoy the show.
Okay. So I can play back the show again and let me know when you want to stop and talk about any of the photos. Still there, Sherry?
Yeah.
Okay.
What? I can't even.
You want to talk? Let me know when you want to talk about one.
Pause.
Next.
So this is a photograph of Cheryl Musarino. She was one of the former presidents of the Kensington Welfare Rights Union. And here we are in the middle of doing a sit-in at Housing and Urban Development because we're trying to get people into affordable housing, and they're immediately sending in various different police officers, and we're getting ready to be arrested. Continue. Stop. I think instead of me just saying stop like that, I think you should just pause. Here we are at one of our tent cities. We've had several, and what a tent city is we reclaim abandoned land. And we think it's better for, instead of a homeless person to be isolated by themselves in the middle of nowhere, that it's much more empowering to have all of us as, homeless people to work together, to share resources and to figure out ways for us to survive. So I think it's this particular encampment here. It actually made the front page of the New York Times. Galen? Pause.
Yeah, I was on mute. Yeah, I mean, this is at a funeral. I don't know if it's because I'm on my phone or whatever, but I can't actually see
It's
the phone.
Carmelo.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. I didn't want to speak on that. Carmelo was a long time member of the Kensington Welfare Rights Union, as well as the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, who was our Mister Do It All. He was one of the first ones on our, when we did either takeover houses or we did tent cities. At the tent cities, Carmelo was always like the first one there with the hammers, helping building shantytown. And Carmelo, had some hard problems. He worked at a job. How many years was it, Sherry? Like 27 years or something like that.
Yep.
And didn't have the health insurance where he worked at. He didn't have health insurance, and so when he started having hard problems and stuff, got laid off with no type of benefits or whatever, and he ended up having a heart attack and he passed away. But Carmelo was one of our Mr. Like I said, do it all. He would help us in relationship to moving families inside houses as the people was getting evicted. He would help. He always a handyman in relationship, could turn on the water, the electric, the gas, paint, fixed everybody's car in the movement at the time. Yeah, he was a true comrade and a fighter in the fight for justice for poor and unemployed people.
Can you talk a little bit about Carmelo needing a heart transplant?
Yeah, he had needed one, and I'm trying to remember exactly the situation because we had like a couple of people that had the same scenario, um, and it was that he was having like he was what was he wasn't it was like a diabetic as well, right, Sherry, and he
Yeah.
had complications or something like that, and they wasn't um willing to give him a heart or something like that.
Well, he didn't qualify
Yeah,
because in order for you to get a heart transplant, you have to show that you have a way to care for whatever transplant part that you get.
yeah.
So that's Carmelo. Oops, did we miss a picture? Oh, okay. Uh, this is uh, this is Katie Engel, who is still very much an online supporter and active. Um, Katie, both an original member of the Kensington Welfare Rights Union and the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, has gone to jail dozens of times in housing takeovers, moved tons of homeless people into abandoned properties, lived at homeless encampments, lived in churches that we took over, you name it. She's definitely one of our elders and very experienced, amazing elder. You can't see in that photograph there very well, at least on my phone, but I believe that's Jackson Brown, who was recently diagnosed with the virus, and I believe he's on the mend now and getting better. But Jackson Brown has been a longtime supporter of the work of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign. He's a singer and songwriter for any young people that are on the phone.
Yeah, and also that was during the March of the Americas where we marched from Washington D.C. Um, to New York. We was turning our backs on the elected officials here in Washington D.C. and we took it to an international level, marching up to New York to the United Nations.
I believe this is a photograph of us fighting um, welfare reform, because it was really about the elimination of welfare as we know it under the Clinton administration. The photograph earlier was a photograph of us in an effort to stop the bailout of the banks during the height of the mortgage foreclosure crisis in this country. And we did several sit-ins in different banks.
And yeah, and that's a picture of Tara Colon holding the sign.
Who is definitely one of our lead generals in this movement since the very beginning. And she's now one of our education directors residing in Florida.
Is that her too on the left?
Yeah, that is Tara.
But
And
we're not going to narrate everything.
yeah, and I was about to say that picture is like a picture from like could look exactly the same from thousands of our gathering protests downtown over the last 3 decades.
That's Mary Luz Gonzalez. Um, and Sherry Honkala and Katie Ingle. And you notice that we have the Army fatigues on. Again, that's demonstrating against the a lot of the welfare deform stuff that was happening at the time, and demonstrations constantly in the downtown Philadelphia area. Oh, and the March to Harrisburg. We marched 22 miles to Harrisburg and set up at the Capitol. Here, the kids are crying because their mother is getting arrested during a housing takeover, one of the houses that we took over in West Philly. Housing takeovers are when you reclaim abandoned properties and house homeless families. And some of the news articles try to make it look like it's a new thing that started like in the last year or as a result of the coronavirus. But we've actually been doing it for decades. But we are very supportive of the folks that are out there doing them right now. Right here, she is doing American Sign Language, and that's me there. The Deaf and Deafblind Committee community and the disability community has always been an integral part and a part of our leadership. And talk about some absolutely amazing leaders over the years that we've learned a great deal about. And most of us have some form of disability or a family member.
Sherry, you gonna say something about that one?
No, I'm just waiting for the next picture. I don't think we have to say something about every picture.
This is Danny Glover, right?
Yeah, that's Danny Glover and a lot of other people from South and Central America, as well as people from Europe and other parts of Asia and other different parts of the country. But this is the March of the Americas, where again we march from Washington D.C. To the United Nations. Oh, matter of fact, yeah, that's from Washington D.C. to the United Nations again. Yeah, and Danny Glover. That was the same time where we received the
Moffat.
the Latia Moffat Award, right?
Yep.
Yeah, the Latia Moffat Award in Washington, D.C.
This is
It's one of our homeless encampments where one of the homeless women that resided at the tent city is cooking up food on a grill. So we're incredibly resourceful. That's Galen, and she's pushing in the stroller.
I'm pushing my daughter Serena.
Okay, Serena's in the stroller, and that's me carrying Guillermo, my son.
And that's doing the march to Mississippi, where we did the march from Marks, Mississippi, to Washington D.C.
What's
reenact.
significant about Marks, Mississippi?
Go ahead, tell them. It's like, yeah, I mean, where the march originally started from with Martin Luther King, and that's where like a lot of his people that was on the march. We met a lot of different people that was on the original march, his family members and stuff. Right, Sherry? The
Yep.
aunt who made the blankets. She had the quilts or the blankets or something that she was
Yeah.
making.
Yep.
And
And then the our former intern Liz Theo Harris, just like they do in raiding shops of unions, they raided some of our relationships, and so people out of confusion started to relate to another campaign that's called the Poor People's Campaign. So please do not mix up the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign and the Poor People's Campaign. We're two very distinctly different campaigns. The Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign doesn't take any money from the Ford Foundation or from big corporations.
and it's led and mostly made up of poor and working class people.
Here we are, try on Stella Street in Kensington. Some neighbors called us one day because some developers were just going to plow and knock down all these properties, and had the permission to take everybody's homes under eminent domain. And now today in Philadelphia, we have an abandoned hospital in Center City, owned by a rich guy, but they won't take that property under eminent domain when that property is needed to save people's lives. This photo here, we were able to save everybody's homes on Stella Street. This is an encampment, and I believe these are a bunch of movement babies. These are Elba's and Mary Lou's children. That's Sheena, Gordo, Babel. Yeah. That's my son, who is Mark Weber, who's getting arrested. He's now an actor and a director. But that's a photograph of him getting arrested fighting for affordable housing in Philadelphia. And he's a formerly homeless kid. In this photograph is former city council member Angel Ortiz, myself, United Electrical Worker President Robert Brown, who sadly committed suicide in October. And then next to him is former President Tom Cronin of District Council 47.
That's like the us coming back to Philadelphia on the bus tour when we came through, or is that? Oh, that's the RNC. That's the opening day of the RNC in 2000, marching down Broad Street. It's also a video made that's called Battle for Broad.
And that's President Henry Nicholas of 1199C. One of our members, Guillermo Santos, and a longtime supporter and member, Carrie Young.
Who's that guy?
This is deceased former Hugo Chavez, former president of Venezuela, where the United States government is currently trying to organize a coup. I had the honor of, as well as like over 100 members of this movement, of being his guest on 2 different occasions.
That photo right there is again just showing how arts, culture, and us always being rooted in ensuring that communication can be out there. The woman up front is Harvey Finkle, who's doing sign for us right there when people are singing a song called the Rich Man House.
This is one of our members of the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign, Angela, who is a mother and a victim of gun violence. And if you look closely, it's literally hundreds of photographs of children that were victims of gun violence. And she carried it on the entire march. All right, so I suppose we should open it up now. If there's any quick questions, we want to thank folks for coming to our photo exhibit. Again, this is the amazing, oh, this is the second part. Again, this is the amazing Harvey Finkle's photographs. And if you look him up, he is really an icon. He's been photographing us for like 30 years for absolutely free. And we love him very much. And once a month, we will have a different series of photographs, because he's got over 1,500 photographs of our work throughout the years, but we think it's important that we honor our own history. So if there's any questions, if you can let Matt know, and we'll answer a few questions before we close.
Anybody have questions? You can speak up. I unmuted you, or you can unmute yourselves. We also have a small audience on Facebook Live that's doing comments and can ask a question if you have any.
Uh-oh, I didn't know we were live. All right, so if there's no questions on Facebook Live, again, we just want to thank people for joining with us. We're new to how all of this stuff works, so the next slideshow will be even better. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Take care of each other and join the Poor People's Army, and let's build the kind of world that we can all be proud to live in for ourselves and for our children. Have a good night.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you for showing up, y'all.
Thank you.